Hey, this is video 2 in my series on biggest mistakes I've made with learning and practicing various instruments. This one is a massive mistake that I'm still trying to recover from today. It applies to most instruments, and I really wish I'd had the sense to think about it back when I was a beginner. So this one, to put it in a couple words, this is just playing without looking at the keys, or for guitar without looking at the fretboard. When I was just getting started with piano, I thought, this isn't a big deal. After all, in most parts of life, it's better to look at what you're doing than not to look at what you're doing. So if it's the piano keys that I really want to be getting to know, why would I spend my valuable piano time trying not to look at the best sight in the world? Well, eventually I found out. It took me a very long time, but I found out. And at that point, it was quite a bit too late. I guess the first warning sign began just by occasionally losing my place now and again while I was sight reading something or playing a lead sheet or whatever and having to search for where I left off. I thought that was normal. To a degree it is, but not really, because my problem was that I was looking at the keys. Eventually, so about 6 or 7 years ago, I began to see this box that I had locked myself into, which I was not going to get out for a very long time. Two things happened within the same 2 or 3 year period. One, I get this one opportunity to play piano for a vocalist at a small Christmas event that my church put on. And since I couldn't sight read well enough to read the sheet music that she provided, I decided to just improvise based on the chords by playing what was very fitting for the song was just these very long arpeggios up and down for pretty much the whole song. And it was just the perfect vibe for the song. It sounded great. She loved it. I loved it. Everyone who heard it said it sounded great. Problem was, midway through the song, I would periodically just stop playing and not know where I was because, well, I just lost my place. Somewhere between looking at the page and looking at the keys, those arpeggios threw me, even though I could play arpeggios in my sleep. So I had to tell the vocalist, yeah, so if that happens during the performance, just keep singing. I promise they'll come back in. It's really good that I was able to come back in. That's one of the perks of using sheet music instead of trying to memorize things, because then you'll never be able to come back in if you lose, your spot. But needless to say, there's something wrong with your skill set if you randomly stop playing because you can't help looking at the keys and then trying to find your place. Fact is, you can't just expect to divide your attention 50-50 between the page and the keys. You can't expect everything to be okay with that. Or for that matter, 70-30 or 30-70, not if you want to have a reliable, consistent experience. Now, I mentioned there were two things that kind of clued me off that this was a problem that was going to be a problem. Well, the other thing was within the same period of 2 or 3 years, and I'm pretty sure this is the right order, but it might have been the other order around. But there was this one point when I decided, you know what, I want to learn sight reading a little bit better. There's a lot of stuff I can do by improvisation that I wish I could do from the page. So I got a handful of books. I just found some random books from random places. And next time I had some piano time, I pulled them out and started with one that I wanted to play. And it was a little bit more advanced than I really probably should have been playing. But it had a lot of songs with a lot of big explosive chords, which I loved at that time. And I wanted to be able to play them by sight the same way I could by ear or by improvisation. Problem was there were so many notes in an individual chord that I would look at the chord and I would look at the piano and find it. And then I would look back up and read the next chord and I would go on the piano and find it. And then I would look back up and look down, find it. And sometimes I would have to look up and down for one chord just to get all the pieces of the one chord. So I think you get the picture. Problem is, nobody can read sheet music like that. It took me a good amount of time just feeling frustrated until I finally realized I'm not going to be developing any skill of sight reading by doing that. Because no matter how good you get, you're still going to be looking up and down. And even if you can get to the point where you've got instant visual recognition, that piece is still going to be unplayable because every metronome beat, you've got to be looking up and down. Imagine watching somebody, performing a piece or sight reading a piece, and the metronome's going 1, 2, 3, 4, and they're going 1, 2, 3. Obviously, it doesn't matter how good you are, you can't sight read. So it was at that point when I kind of gradually came to realize, okay, I'm at a wall, and I've got to get over this thing about playing without looking. So I Googled my problem, went to Master Google, typed in something to the effect of, I mean, it was a long time ago, but I'm sure it was something to the effect of how to play piano without looking at the keys, just see what people say. And I didn't find a lot, but I finally found one piece of advice from a piano teacher on some forum or something like that. And he basically said, if I get a new student who's, decently advanced, but he can't play without looking, first thing I'll have him do is I'll just require him to, at that point, he's going to start playing without looking. He's never going to look, from then on. And then if we're in a lesson and he looks while playing or practicing, and then I tell him the same thing for when he's practicing. If he looks one time, start over. You play through, get through 2 measures, and you look, start over. Well, that sounds fun. Took me a while to make my choice, but I finally decided to take the plunge. I just went cold turkey. Probably not the best decision I ever made. I decided to play all sheet. Every time I would do anything related to sheet music or lead sheets or anything like that, I would play cold turkey, no looking at the keys. The one exception I gave myself was for improvisation, when I would just sit down to improvise for fun. I could do just the way I always did it. And the reason was because for me, improvising is such an experiential thing. And I would do it like as a way to cope with life, that kind of thing, kind of as a release. And I just couldn't imagine giving that up. And I'm glad I didn't, because that would have been bad. So the upside is that I did eventually improve. The downside is that practice became a really, really horrible chore. It was kind of like losing your language skills and having to babble like an infant again. So it took years. And in fact, I'm still working on it. I'm getting better now. But even now, my comprehension of sheet music, like when I look at a measure, I can understand it in a way that's significantly ahead of my ability to feel my way to the notes and play them, So, moral of the story, if you're starting, or even if you're further along, get this going before it's too late. Don't neglect it, because you're going to have to learn it eventually, unless you want to get permanently stuck right at that point, right before things get really interesting and really fun. Now, my cold turkey approach that was the best thing I could find from Google, I would definitely say it probably wasn't the best way to fix the issue. And I'm going to have to get my cord because my battery's about to die. Okay, where was I? Yeah, so that cold turkey approach probably wasn't the best way to fix the issue. If I had to do it again, I would use a gentler approach, because going cold turkey like that made me hate practice and basically do it a lot less for those years leading up to now. But now I don't hate it, because I can actually play. I just play a little slower than I should be, than what my skill level should be. But in the beginning, it was like, literally, if I have this piece that I know well, and I'm spending all my time in the first couple measures trying to feel my way, to know what octave I'm in, that kind of thing, So maybe a gentler approach would be, for every exercise you play, let's say a scale or something, or for every piece of music that you run through, do it the way you're used to, but then do it blind every 2 or 3 times, So the point with that would be that it would be consistent. You're doing it every 2 or 3 times, because the goal would be, you need to keep on building that skill, rather than letting yourself keep on growing in this out of proportion. My one skills are like this, my other skills are like this, and that's not where you want to be. So for piano, playing without looking, what that would mean is being able to play, to feel where you are with your fingers on the keyboard at any point. And you do that by feeling the gaps between the B and the C, or the E and the F, because you feel, is there a black key here, or is there a gap? And for guitar, I guess that would mean feeling frets in relation to the nut, which is what I've been trying to build toward that skill. The main thing I'm focusing on with guitar right now, in terms of playing without looking, is being able to play exercises such as scales without looking. But once I'm already, I already have my finger in the position, I'll look to get myself in, let's say 5th position, whatever, and then I'll try not to look after that, or to play sheet music within a given position without looking once I'm already in position. I've also been working on being able to play particular power chords on the bottom strings without looking at all, and then I just kind of slide and do it based on the nut. And I don't know if that's, what professionals do, but anyway, all these different aspects, it's kind of a big headache. But since I'm not doing the cold turkey approach, it really just ends up being one more calm and consistent part of practice that just reminds me that I am slowly getting better, rather than going cold turkey and you just lose your skills. It's like you lose your skills suddenly. Now, a couple of important notes about guitar, at least based on my experience. First off, I don't think it's necessary to focus on playing without looking necessarily at first with your open chords if you're just a beginner with guitar. So when I started playing guitar it was a small church group that I would play guitar for back in 2015, it was 2015. And I struggled a little at first because I would be glued to the chord chart and then try to look at my fingers and get the chord right. So it was a little difficult at first, but over time, I just gradually got better at doing it. It just happened on its own. And I think part of the reason for that is because all the chords for your open chords, they're all in the same ballpark. So your muscle memory can just gradually, this is how you make, it's basically a finger shape. You don't have to, there's no separate skill you necessarily have to develop. So in terms of that, you can kind of just, intuit it. And then second, here's a kind of a pragmatic image to put in your head. This is kind of your, wake up if you haven't had the wake up yet. So one day I was visiting this church I'd never been to. They had a pretty decent band. It was one of those cases where you look up at the band and it's like, they look like ordinary people. Clearly, some of them are more musicians than others, but when they play together, It sounds great. They're together, feels natural and alive, more so than a lot of church music. Feels real, like they're actually playing, And then I looked over at the bassist, and he was doing this thing at his bass. And then he would look up and then look back down at his bass. And then he would look up, look back down at the bass. Maybe he would glance at one of the band members and then look back down at the bass. I felt so bad for the guy, because who wants to try to play music while you're partially paralyzed? Who wants to try to enjoy the moment of the musical experience while you're constantly trying to unglue yourself from either the page or the instrument? Who wants to try to enjoy the musical moment while you're not free to observe your bandmates, while you're not free to look at the page, if that's what you need to do because it's a new song, let's say, Really, the freedom you find when you realize that you can play while looking anywhere, it's a pretty good feeling. For me, that's a feeling that I get a little bit now, because I'm just starting to be able to do it, but it's still not the normal thing for me. So anyway, this is list item number 2 in my worst mistakes learning instruments. Huge mistake for piano. Big mistake if you're going to try to do lead guitar or something like that. Next up in the series, I think I'll probably do something to the effect of trying to practice content that's outside of my skill level. I might do something like that, but I haven't decided what number 3 is actually going to be. So I guess we'll see when we get there. But definitely, if you're a beginner piano player, if you're a beginner, you're just stepping into lead guitar or any of the more advanced, electric guitar type stuff, definitely learn how to play without staring at your instrument. It'll help you out in dividends.